welcome back to Beauty Within. For me, the health and wellness and that whole area and how skincare ties into that is where I find a lot of joy. You can see through today's topic, which is all about periods, menstrual cycle, because our period is a very natural thing, our menstrual cycle, but no one really tells us what's actually happening, and the information out there after we started looking into it was like, why haven't we known this growing up? Why wasn't it taught to us? So what we really want to focus on with these types of videos that we're going to do is body literacy. And what that means is really understanding what is truly going on in our system, in our bodies, what that means, and how we can then adapt and change certain things in our lifestyle to, soothe. And I think a lot of the time it's so easy to become out of touch with ourselves mentally and physically. And when you combine the two, it's no wonder that, we're stuck thinking like, oh my God, why am I feeling this way? What am I actually feeling? And how does that affect me physically and biologically? And even like change my menstrual cycle, and all of that actually plays together. And this is where we're going to focus on all of it. And furthermore, there are different approaches from different cultures. So there's Western approaches as well as Eastern, and understanding how both of these approach the body and different ways that we can alleviate certain pains and soothe different areas, I think is really important to get a holistic understanding of what this temple that we call our body truly is. As we mentioned in our first video, our menstrual cycle actually goes through 4 different phases, and we said it was very similar to the way that within a year there's 4 seasons, and within each season you have to kind of tend to different things and adjust the way we do certain things, the way that we feel, and it's actually a very good symbol of what's going on in our bodies. So then why do we cramp, and what does that mean? Like, what are our bodies trying to tell us? Okay, so here's how it works in a nutshell. The lining of the uterus produces a substance called prostaglandin, otherwise known as PGs, and they're actually a type of hormones. So hormones are present throughout our bodies, and they're normally produced in glands that are then transported through the bloodstream to different areas of our bodies. But the difference between other hormones and prostaglandin is that prostaglandins are actually produced at the site of where they're needed, and it's normally in an area where we're experiencing any sort of pain. So inflammation, fevers, cuts, any sort of like thing that our brain processes as pain, prostaglandin will be able to be produced there. So for example, when we accidentally cut ourselves or, we get hurt, the prostaglandin hormone will then stimulate our bodies to produce a blood clot to therefore stop ourselves from bleeding to death. So you can kind of think of it like, if there's a fire in your home, in your humble abode, you would call the fire brigade, and then you need to wait for them to get from where they are to the site to fix and, water down the fire, right? So that's kind of like the way normal hormones travel through the bloodstream to the affected site. But prostaglandin is like if it was more like a genie that just came up wherever the problem really was. Okay, so going back to why we even get period cramping and why we get that sensation in our uterus. So what's happening is that our uterus is contracting, the muscles are trying to push out the uterus lining so that it sheds, and then, we get our period. So this happens in the luteal phase of our menstrual cycle, which is right before the actual bleeding part of it, which is also where we tend to experience the PMSing symptoms. And when this is happening, there's also a decrease in oxygen that's passing through the muscles, which can also add to that tightened cramping feeling. And that is why we, on the outside, feel like cramps. So now tying these two things that we've talked about, the prostaglandin as well as the uterus shedding, here's where it gets interesting. So there are different types of prostaglandins, but there are 3 in particular that help with our uterus specifically. So PGE 1 and 3 is actually in control of muscle relaxation in the uterus, whereas PGE 2 has to do with muscle contraction, which then makes us understand if we're actually doing things right, we shouldn't be experiencing any pain, and that the cramping and PMS syndromes are a little bit more of a myth. As well as that, there's other things that are also going on in the body, like high levels of estrogen and low levels of progesterone, because every week of our phase, these levels will change, and they have everything to do with our mood, our, sensitivities physically and mentally, body as well as our appetites and everything, which is why we need a very tailored menu every single week to really help understand our bodies and what's actually happening. So that is more of a biological, like Western perspective. Now let's turn to the more Eastern perspectives, like traditional Chinese medicine approaches. And what's interesting about traditional Chinese medicine is that it believes there's a deeper connection between our bodies and nature, and kind of views the body as a reflection of the universe. Ooh, so deep. You can imagine it like how rivers run from mountains and then into the ocean that carry salts and nutrients to support plants and animal life, right? Isn't it kind of similar to how our blood vessels transport blood and oxygen and nutrients also through our bodies? I think so. So when nothing interferes and the current flows nicely, everything along the river's ecosystem is well and healthy. And this is much like when we have good blood circulation and healthy blood, everything is flowing and in balance and our bodies are in good health. But you know, when a river looks congested and nasty, things will be out of sorts. And in this case, when the energy and the blood in the body is stagnant, this is when we tend to get period cramps. So I just watched this interview with Dr. Lippman, who studied both Western medicine and Eastern approaches to the health of our bodies, and I found the analogy he made so interesting. So he kind of made this analogy between Western and Eastern approaches. He said in a hospital, for example, if something's broken, you take it out or you try to fix it, like you perform surgery. Whereas in Chinese medicine, you're taught to see that the body is more like a gardener and the patient is like a flower. So instead of trying to take it out or fix it, you look to see if it's getting enough sun, if it needs more water, or if the roots are deep enough and being pinched down. And I think where it gets a little bit gray or confusing is that sometimes there's just no absolute right or wrong, which is what I think a lot of us want to take away most of the time, but it's more about paying attention to the body and interpreting what it's really trying to show us. When we're suffering from period cramps, we might want to find quick fixes or be like, you know, why is my body doing this to me? But have you ever asked yourself if you've gotten enough sleep, if you've fed your body the right nutrients that it needs, and if you've found ways to really care for yourself physically and emotionally so that your body can really function at its best? So according to this perspective, there are 3 different types of period pains and 3 different times that it can occur. So the first type of period pain happens before our actual menstruation or the bleed. And this is known as the luteal phase in Western perspectives, or the period where we get those PMS syndromes. So swollen breasts, maybe mood swings, we're a little bit more sensitive, or we have like cravings. Type 2 is the type of pain that we experience during our menstruation, so during our period. Typically, if you feel headaches or cold limbs like hands and feet. So these first 2 types of pain are related to weak blood, and that is a term that's directly translated. This means that there's not enough blood flow to ensure that there are enough nutrients that are circulating throughout our body, which then causes pain. So if you find that you fit into either of the categories above, or even both, which is pretty unfortunate because then that's just pain like half the time. Then here are some things that you can consider. First thing is that you can avoid consuming ice drinks or cold foods or even raw foods. And adding on to the previous tip, you'll want to try limit foods that are cold in nature, which is different from cold temperature, right? So in Eastern perspectives, all the foods that we eat have a different quality to them, whether they're hot or cold. And growing up in an Asian family, this was always instilled in me, this kind of creating this balance within our own bodies and our own ecosystem. Now the next point is something more physical or lack of physical, and it's to avoid sitting for long periods of time. Sometimes we think, you know, the last thing that we want to do on our period is to walk around or be like physical and do physical exercise, but actually a little bit can go a long way into actually relieving that pain. So just remember to get up, stand, walk around, do a little squat here and there. So if you're like me and you tend to notice that there's a lot of like cystic acne building up around that time of month, then this is what we're talking about. Because according to traditional Chinese medicine, the location of our breakouts and the severity of it appearing in different areas of the face is reflective of different organs that are either not performing to its optimal state. So when we experience them around our chin, this is directly related to our reproductive system. So it's very linked to irregular menstrual cycles as well as imbalanced hormones. hormones. And we can even see this in Western approaches, that when there's a rapid change in our hormones, it can signal different areas of our, sebaceous glands to produce more oils and sebum, which then gets clogged and then we get breakouts, right? So it's actually all very related. And the difference between this one and the first two we mentioned was that the first two had to do with weak blood, but this one is caused by blood heat, or something that we commonly can associate with inflammation. So let's for a second think of our body like kind of a car. So a car is made up of different parts. It's got wheels, it's got the engine, there's seats, there's windows and everything, right? So it's similar to our body. Our body is the car and it's made up of internal organs. And each part is in charge of helping the engine operate smoothly. And so if we run the car on high speed, but we feed it poor fuel and we don't maintain it, we don't take it to service, there's a lack of lubrication and cooling fluid, then it's gonna get hot and eventually just like combust and shut down, right? It would be like a poo 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 on the road. This is exactly the same as if we were to feed our bodies, junk food, high saturated fats, refined sugars. We're feeding it unhealthy and low quality fuel, which will then affect our mood, our stress levels, the way that we deal with certain situations, and it will break down. And you will see that showing on the surface. So taking all of this into account, what we really want to focus on is an anti-inflammatory diet, as well as staying away from heat or hot foods. And these include fried, salted, heavily processed, and alcohols, just to name a few. Womp womp. I'm sorry, kids. If you want a healthy body, this is just something you're gonna have to do. Now, this might be a little bit strange, but have you guys ever heard of diarrhea during the period, or just like period poops? I definitely have, because I feel like during my period, it seems to come out like more constantly. I'm not sure. Is that TMI? That's probably TMI. But it's not that it's like diarrhea. It just comes out smoother. And I always questioned why. So we looked into it, and remember our hormone friend prostaglandin? Well, they don't just reside in one area of our body, they're actually everywhere. So during the time of our menstruation, when the prostaglandins are in our gut and maybe in our uterus, they can contract and create bowel movements, which then means poops. Pretty crazy, because remember, they come up at the scene wherever our body needs it, right? So that's just where all the goods happen. Now moving on to the part of the video where we get a little active, well, basically active in the kitchen. Nutrients and cooking, this is where I love, because food is medicine. Because if you think about how you take medicine to cure different pains and different areas, food does exactly the same. It's being consumed and being spread throughout the body to aid it in different ways. So I have some simple recipes here to help you guys alleviate your period pains or whenever, and they're all just really delicious and really easy. So the first is oats with banana and a bit of jam. Hello guys. Okay, so I am going to make something to eat, and I thought today would be a good breakfast option for making oats. So let's go. Oats are rich in vitamin B and also helps with neurotransmissions. So I'm not exactly sure how to make this one, which is the steel cut oats, because normally I use these old-fashioned rolled oats, which are like the full-on kernel, but there's not enough. So there's a lot of different B vitamins, but B6 when it comes to eating is especially important because it can help to boost the progesterone levels, which then counteracts the excess estrogen that's going on in our bodies. Then our old friend, the humble banana, is rich in magnesium as well as vitamin B6 and also potassium. So potassium can really help with our bloating and cramping symptoms. And potassium is also something that our bodies need in order to rebalance our sodium levels. So sometimes if we have too much sodium rich foods like, chips or instant noodles or anything like that, our bodies need the potassium to then bring it back to a healthy state. So excited! Dude, it looks so fresh. Although the portion is a little smaller than I thought. Maybe the steel cut oats, because they're like smaller, it's not as big of a portion as the rolled oats that I'm used to. But look, it looks so delicious. Jam, banana, and honey, you cannot go wrong. Who says health isn't delicious? There's a cherry. Bing! And it's not like super sweet, which is like what a lot of jams tend to be because they use just sugar, but this one just uses grape juice, so. Bing. The next one is actually super easy. It's a fried egg using sesame oil. So I'm gonna make the egg with the sesame oil and have it with a little bit of the kimchi stew that I made last night, overnight, leftovers. You know, keep it delicious and soothe the womb. Yay! Let's make this egg. Well, the egg is right here. Okay, so here we have our good old-fashioned pure sesame oil, and I love this stuff. You can see I'm like almost out of it because it smells divine. We looked into the benefits of sesame oil, and it helps to warm up the body. It helps with contraction of the uterus. It's also rich in zinc and copper, which helps the production of red blood cells, blood circulation, and our general metabolism. Because metabolism is also very important. Sometimes, like I realized, you can eat a burger in 1 week of your menstrual cycle, and then 2 weeks later, you can't digest it in the same way. You feel even more lethargic, whereas, you know, before you could just digest it so easily. And it's because of different phases of the menstrual cycle and our different metabolism and how it all plays together. And then the benefits of egg is that it goes back to those essential omega fatty acids like omega-3 and 6, as well as ions, vitamins, minerals, and carotenoids. You can hear it bubbling away. Oh my god, guys, this smells so good. Sesame oil. Look at that yolk, that pristine yellow yolk. I feel like I'm doing an animal documentary. Egg flip time. That's it. Doesn't look that great, but it's delicious. But just a note, if your body is heating in nature, then you probably shouldn't consume too much sesame oil because sesame oil is a hot natured food, but everything in moderation because we do at the end of the day need a balance of both. And another way to get those essential fatty acids is just like an avocado toast. So avocado oils are great. If you use avocado oil in cooking, it's even better than obviously like your canola oils because they don't actually give you as much nutritional value. Plus the avocado oil has a higher burning point, which means that before it starts to oxidize on the pan, it's actually much more beneficial to your body and better to cook with. And especially in our luteal phase or the premenstrual phase, we want to load up on things like omega fats like omega-3, 6. So this includes avocados, tuna or salmon, even nuts, and ingesting more of these things rather than letting ourselves have too much like refined sugars, which is sometimes what our body like thinks it's craving, but it's actually because we're not feeding it the things that it really needs. Then in one of our previous videos, we mentioned the ginger and brown sugar drink. And this is one of those go-to kind of herbal, it's not even herbal, it's like concoctions to help aid the uterus. Ginger is an essential spice in Chinese cuisine and in Chinese medicine, and it's also a very strong and warming ingredient. And for that, it's great to keep the stomach warm. And sometimes even Chinese doctors will give you like ginger as an ingredient to also help with vomiting symptoms. So definitely food as medicine. Brown sugar is also another warming ingredient and helps to counteract that like spice and zing and heat of the ginger. So it complements each other really well in a beverage, which is why it's my go-to. So with that, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We're gonna keep kind of dissecting the body and different ways that we can help to work with it and understand it more, you know, going back to that body literacy, because it all has to do with understanding ourselves and learning what we can utilize around us and feed so that we can further improve and nourish our cycles. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.